And so I guess an extension of that, you at Timescale have this idea of letting databases handle the complexity. And I think one of the things that developers don't want to do is sort of a database maintenance job where they have to make sure their database is up to date all the time. But can you just talk about how Timescale might have a differentiated approach to handling those issues?
Yeah, so I think I assume you're talking about, there's this whole concept of a managed database, which Timescale does offer, but, we also welcome folks self-hosting and things like that. I think one additional concept that I'll bring up is this idea of like pushing complexity to the database and letting the database handle things that you otherwise might have to do manually on the application layer. A good example of this is this feature that we built called Vectorizer. And it basically deals with this problem of, let's say you have a RAG application and you're adding documents or you're deleting documents. In the old paradigm of just using a specialized vector database, you'd have to go and run your embedding pipeline. You'd have to make sure that your database is up to date. But what if it was just like a database index where you do your adds and deletes in the database, and then the index just updates itself? And so that's why we built this vectorizer feature that really takes away the complexity of embedding, creation, and updating, so that you can just use your application, you can add documents, you can delete documents, etc. And then we'll take care of like actually creating the embeddings. Those are created in the model of your choice, as well as doing the updates and deletes in your vector search index so that those are up to date. Some cool knock-on effects of this is that it actually makes it very easy to test and experiment with your with different embedding models. And this is something that, again, in this quest for getting accurate and getting useful AI answers, you want to make sure that you're testing and experimenting to understand, like, okay, what is your evaluations look like? What does your recall look like? And I think that especially now with like all the innovation going on in open source, a question I often hear from developers is like, hey, I started off using OpenAI like 6 months ago, but like, should I move to open source? Which open source models are good enough? And unfortunately, the question always is like, hey, it depends on your data set and it depends on like your requirements. But now with this kind of easy experimentation feature, you can just run that experiment really easy rather than having to build like a separate pipeline to embed your data with open source embeddings, etc. We've reduced it to just like a single SQL query. So that's a good example of that philosophy of like letting the database handle complexity where it can. And we also know that one thing I will point out is that we're not like database maximalists. I don't know if that's a term, but like that's like not us either, where we actually think there's certain jobs that the database shouldn't do. For example, like we wouldn't do embedding creation inside the database. Like the way that Vectorizer works is that it works with where the database communicates with the third-party worker. And then that's where embeddings get created. And then those embeddings get sent to the database. And so we're mindful of those things like that, where, understanding at which layer of the stack the complexity needs to handle, and then also how to abstract all that away and create interfaces that users can actually use quite easily without having to worry about all the details.